Hello, this is the last video in First Steps in Pen and Ink, and you should have reached the point where we're discussing contrast and where we're discussing cast shadow. So the theory of cast shadow is that your primal self, this million-year-old self that's skipping along the path in the forest, recognises that something is coming towards you, that something is a missile if it hasn't got any cast shadow. And the theory is that if you draw something like an apple with without a cast shadow, when the viewer looks at it, they'll get a catch reflex like this, and that will negate any endorphin reflex that they might have looking at your apple. So it's just a theory, folks. I think there's multiple times when it doesn't apply. However, it does help to have a bit of a cast shadow in your drawing. And that then leads us on to thinking about how would we render that cast shadow. And the first thing is to ask yourself, is it an important part of the drawing? And the answer to that is no, of course not, because nobody cares about the cast shadow. They just want the cast shadow to be there as a reference point. It's a piece of supporting information that tells you that the apple is friendly, ripe, and ready to be eaten. It's not an end in itself. And so again, in the modern environment where you get multiple cast shadows, so if you ever came to one of my drawing classes that I held in my house, in this middle room in my house, I've got these multiple little sparkly lights. They're beautiful lights, but they're hopeless for drawing with because you get loads of different cast shadows. Your primal template that the reference point for the computer program that is assessing the drawing that has been done, that is decoding the marks that have been made on that page, recognises only one shadow. So it is absolutely pointless drawing all those shadows because it doesn't enhance the drawing at all. So it's another thing, a little bit like relative tone. It just needs to be there. You don't need to get it right. So it doesn't even need to move away from, I found it doesn't even need to move logically away from an illumination point in your drawing. Honestly, really, nobody cares. They just go, oh, shadow, right, okay, I'll look at this drawing, it's fine. And so the cast shadow, you want to make it less important. And how do we know how to make cast shadow less important? Well, number one, we drive it towards the midtone. So even if your shadow is super dark in reality, you want to keep it as being in the midtone. And I actually, if I'm doing a little still life drawing that's got a cast shadow, I do my cast shadow first. I do it with straight cross hatching. That's my visual language that says this bit is boring, boring, boring. And actually all the interesting bits, all the texture, all the lines that move in an interesting way are on the subject. The other thing I do is I do put a closed line around the outside of my cast shadow, and quite a few of my students have pointed out and they've gone, oh, but you know, you're kind of making it the subject if you put a closed line around the outside of your cast shadow. And they're absolutely right. You know, I put a line around the cast shadow for, you know, just because it makes it easier to draw. But actually, there are specific circumstances where we found that closing that loop around the cast shadow is a bit of a mistake. And certainly on a piece of digital art now, even if I've cross-hatched a cast shadow, I will actually airbrush out the edge. Because I think the cast shadow probably doesn't need to have a harsh edge. However, you're the artist, you make your mind up about that, depending on the medium you're working in and how you're doing it. But for an orange, I find it's fine, but there's certain other subjects where things get a little bit more complicated, or you've got multiple subjects, and actually closing the loop around the outside of the cast shadow is not a good idea. So do have a try at this last exercise, which is the cut pepper, you know, and the cut orange, because they're relatively simple, but you can use all of your skills because you need to close a shape on the outside. There's different textures, but not that many different textures on the inside. And you have to create a cast shadow and you get a jolly nice drawing. And I do find that pretty much most of the time students get to a point where this is the exercise where it all kind of falls into place because you know the logical steps. You're going to use a pencil to outline your drawing very lightly. Don't do that for more than 1 or 2 minutes. Just work out where everything is and then use your pen. Don't worry if you've got things a little bit wrong with your pen. Just keep on drawing. Give yourself a nice closed shape around the outside of the object. Preserve some white tones and remember that the darkest and the lightest tones define your subject. So if you preserve some white paper on the thing that is the most important, you will get a drawing that looks absolutely fab, regardless of your drawing ability. How hard can it be? Anyway, this is the end of the course. Thank you so much for watching. Oh, on my notes down here, I've just glanced down. I also have made a little note to myself to remind you to look up Frida Stenmark, because her stuff is such fun. And it's a wonderful example of doing really nice pen and ink drawing. And she's making all of her drawings quite simple, that they're simple, discrete subjects like a key or the crazy animals she starts creating, where she's putting 2 things together. But her drawings are accomplishable. So if you look at a bit of Frida Stenmark, you can get inspiration for how you could keep yourselves going with the level of skill that you've acquired over this 5-part course. And my advice to you at the moment would just keep things simple. Draw one thing at a time, work out what its shape is, where the cast shadow is, what its texture is, and how relative tone can be applied to that subject. And you should be able to enjoy your drawings hugely. If you want to carry on, there's further steps in pen and ink, and then lots more other drawing classes, sketchbook workshops and all sorts, or you can join me on Patreon as well for the Drawing Academy. So thank you for joining me and enjoy your drawing, and I hope to see you on another course.